All right, thanks so much, Kelly and Abafasi, for playing us in. And so welcome everybody. We're gonna move forward with Pouring of Libations by our brother Malcolm. So, Kelly, I'll ask that you all turn your cameras off, please. And we need you to unmute yourself, Brother Malcolm.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Just got this new professional mic, so hopefully you can hear me clearly. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for all of you who have come today. What I'll be doing is pouring libation, which is essentially taking water, which is a symbol of life, and pouring that into a living substance or receptacle as a symbol of taking the unformed matter of heaven, the unconditioned, the infinite, eternal substance that has the capacity to transform into, transcend, and not be permanently misshapen by anything, and pouring that into the earth, which represents being able to enter into the earth, yet not be of the earth, but be of peace. So to be of peace, but in the earth, to be in the earth, but not of it. So we say that this is our essential essence and quality for being able to deal with the racial justice fight and victory. So we say we give thanks to the one God who comes, Father, Mother God, who comes in and as the many forms of life, all of the divine transformations and situations, the people, things, and places which present the genuine opportunities to help us work on realizing our divinity. We say thank you for the principle of peace, which is the likeness in which we are made, the substance for giving us and source for all of our virtues and transcending all that manifests in this life. We say thank you for peace, the ability to enter into relationships and associations with others in a way that creates harm for no one. We say thank you, God, for coming in and as the principle of oneness. Thank you for revealing to us the oneness of all life, knowing that nothing is truly against us and all things serve to further. So we claim no permanent or eternal enemies. We say thank you for the oneness between our thoughts and our deeds. Thank you between our intention and that which we profess out loud. Thank you for the oneness between all disparate people and things and a vision and image of what it could be. We say thank you for the principle of wisdom, which is the mutual benefit of all concerned, which comes to us as an intuition or the voice of the divine to guide our choices each day and enlighten our will that we may be in conflict with no one. So with this principle of wisdom, we are able to will for ourselves as God would will and will for others as we will for ourselves. We say thank you, Supreme Being, for coming in as the principle of spiritual power, the ability to embrace the limitations of earthly life and unleash the divine spiritual power that comes as we understand that we have a destiny on this earth, that all the limitations that we encounter are there to show us that we truly have none. We say thank you for showing us that we must do and go through certain things in order to have power to be able to affect and touch all things in this world. We say thank you for the principle of love, which is law, the ability to use principle in our relationships with others, to be able to take the substance of love and take it beyond a feeling and to be loving beings and blessings to every single person and thing that we meet. We say thank you for the principle of justice. Thank you for the courage to cut away from the lower part of our being that allows us or prompts us to be selfish and to seek gain at the expense of others. We say thank you for the ability to secure and demand justice by living the truths that we espouse and courageously refusing to violate anyone. We say thank you for the principle of freedom, the essence in which we are made. We say our peace is what makes us free. Our unconditioned matter and nature is what makes us free. We are free to choose in this moment to live the truths that we have studied. We are free to choose to do what is right, even when compelled to do otherwise. We are free to reimagine and reshape this world in the image and interest of all who live on this planet. And we are free to do something different than every single thing that may have been done incorrectly up until this very second. Irrespective of who you've been or what you have not done up until now, you are free to live in a way that takes your life in a totally different direction. And in so doing, helps to give an example and encourage others to have sovereignty and freedom in their lives. We say thank you, God, for the principle of joy. We know that you have placed joy within our spirits. It is dependent on neither person, place, situation, thing, nor accomplishment. So we envision a life of joyful, lawful, loving living and will ourselves to be joyful for life itself. We say thank you for the principle of the word that affirms the divine in others that we see, that seeks and speaks about what could be, and spends most of our conversation speaking into existence the things that we need in this earth. We say thank you for the principle of sacrifice or devotion and the willingness to give up all things in pursuit of that which is correct. We say thank you for all of the warriors, the healers, the teachers, the leaders, the mothers, the advocates for justice who have given their lives, who have sacrificed sleep, energy, time, blood, sweat, tears, recognition, monetary gain, so that we could have a better world and all in it can prosper and heal. We say thank you for this physical earth, this physical body, and for the divine energy that animates all of our aspirations to do what is correct. We say thank you for the teachings that allow us to pursue health and to seek healing for all who have been injured in this war and campaign. We acknowledge all of the many freedom fighters who have come before us, whose names that we know and some who are not known. We ask you silently at this time just to call their names or out loud, even with your mics off. And for all of those names, we say Ashe. As you call them, we say Ashe. As you call them, we say Ashe. I want to give thanks for all of the women in particular who have given birth to civilization, who have fought, who have nourished, and who have helped to feed an impulse in all of us to seek something greater, better, and improved than that which has become the norm. 3 times, in the spirit of unity, justice, truth, healing, and peace, we say Ashe, 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 and we give thanks. Peace and blessings, everyone.
All right, we thank you, Brother Malcolm, for those words. So, peace and greetings to all joining us from wherever you are in the world for the 23rd annual and first virtual Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit. My name is Kevin Jarbo, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Summit's program committee. Though many of us would have liked to hold the summit in person, we are deeply grateful for the opportunity and ability to bring this program to you all virtually. So let's please thank our musical performers Abafasi, which means many women's, Angela Abadia, Lois Tony McClendon, Lori Russo, Rebecca Dugan, and Kelly E. Parker for welcoming us all with the energy of their beats and melodies. We also thank our good brother Malcolm for leading us through the African tradition of pouring libations to honor our ancestors, which puts us on a path to healing as we acknowledge the lives of those we lost, to pray for guidance as we reflect on the past, and to order our steps in the present as we march forward together into the future. And as we march, I ask that you join us in acknowledging our occupation of the land that we're on. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the stolen land of the Lenape, Munsee, Susquehannock, Shawnee, Iroquois, and many more known and unnamed, which we now call Pittsburgh. This land was founded upon the erasures and exploitation of many non-European people. It is our duty to protect and honor the history and people of these places. We pay respect to the Black indigenous people of color who were stolen from their land in Africa and brought to the Indian subcontinent, North America, South America, the Caribbean islands, the Middle East, and throughout the world. We acknowledge the suffering endured from the cruelty of the horrible institution of genocide, slavery, racism, segregation, and the continued oppression of Black and Brown people throughout the world. Together, we acknowledge the memory of our ancestors. Thank you. And as is Summit tradition, please join us in song for this rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the Black National Anthem by Talia Barbarouse. You can find a link to the lyrics in the chat.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as listening skies. Let Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun. Of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is
Thank you so much, Talia, for formally beginning this year's Racial Justice Summit. As you may know, on October 12, 1995, Johnny Gammage died during an encounter with multiple Pittsburgh area police officers. Just one bystander was reported to have watched Johnny's death unfold. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd's life was taken by a police officer in Minneapolis while the entire world watched. The cause of death in either case, with many before, between, and since, was positional asphyxiation, excessive pressure to the neck and chest that restricted and prevented Johnny's and George's ability to breathe. Following Johnny's killing, in 1996, then president of the Pittsburgh chapter of the NAACP, Stevens co-founded Black and White Reunion. Its mission to bring together organizations and individuals to do the collective work to dismantle the systems of oppression that impact the basic needs of Black and Brown people, and at the same time harms everyone, regardless of social identity or socioeconomic status. In Johnny's memory, we established the Johnny Gammage Memorial Scholarship Fund, supported largely through summit proceeds and donations. This fund provides an annual scholarship awarded to law students of color studying civil rights and social justice issues at the University of Pittsburgh or Duquesne University Law Schools. We will put a link in the chat for students to apply for the scholarship with a resume and an essay responding to the Johnny Gammage Scholarship question. Through organizing by original members of the Black and White Reunion, including our beloved late Ann Mason, the Pittsburgh Summit Against Racism, now known today as the Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit, was born. Every year, during the first weekend after the holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we gather in continued solidarity and commitment to the causes of inclusive racial, social, political, economic, and environmental justice. This year's theme is Rise, Revolt, Repeat, building sustained movements for social justice. If any lessons have been learned in this fight for social justice, bringing together our communities in ways that nurture, educate, protect, and uplift one another has been absolutely critical in dismantling systemic oppression. In tonight's keynote conversation and feature panel discussion, we will learn more about what that looks like from some folks who have been doing the work. With that, I will hand things over to Yvette Eve Shipman to introduce tonight's keynote conversation.
Hey y'all, am I here? Can you see me? Well, I guess you don't really need to, but I will say that I am super excited about tonight. I was literally on the floor before coming on camera. So yeah, you're in for a treat, to say the least. So I met Reverend Angel and Dr. Sai, affectionately known as Dr. Sai, 3 years ago at Radical Dharma Camp. It was my birthday gift to myself because the way in which I embrace the work of anti-racism and social justice advocacy was really no longer working for me. And what I unlearned there literally blew my skirt up and informs my practice to this day. So Mr. Sherrills I met only recently, and when you hear this brother speak about the work that he and his community are doing in Newark, New Jersey, it's equally mind-blowing. So in speaking to the theme of resist, revolt, repeat, building sustained movements for justice, these three profound visionaries and prominent thought leaders will talk with us about the power we hold as individuals and facilitate for us as a community how we create fundamental and lasting change. Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, liberation leader and teacher, my teacher, brings mindful practices and an engaging fearlessness to conversations on race and transformation. Rev Angel speaks truths that force us to rethink our beliefs about change and the power of love and damn near everything else. Dr. Sai, Africana Studies professor and Black feminist theorist, she alerts us to the power of Black women in the face of slavery and incarceration as a route for understanding liberation practices of embodied social change. She pushes us to consider our own roots of resistance and how these threads build our abilities to make community and institutional changes. And Brother Aquila Sherrills, prominent organizer and 2020 Euphrates Visionary of the Year, centers activism and community healing journeys across the country. His ability to foster engagement and inspire social change continues to build bridges towards peace in situations that are so daunting, most wouldn't dare to believe that anything else was possible. So I'd like you to please take a moment with me to just slow down and feel your breath, inhaling and exhaling in your own time as we open our hearts to Reverend Angel, to Dr. Sai, to Mr. Sherrills. Let's welcome these powerhouse speakers to the 23rd Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit opening ceremony to share their wisdom and expertise as they model a communal conversation grounded in an embodied practice and authentic beliefs. Without further ado, Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Dr. Sai, and Mr. Aquila Sherrills.
Making sure we can be heard. Hello.
Hello.
All right. Where is Dr. Sai?
Dr. Sai.
Start video.
Yeah.
Start your video, Dr. Sai.
Start your video, Dr. Sai.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Oh.
It just looks like I'm blocked from doing my video. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Sai.
Hello. Great to see you all.
So good to see you. So first, everybody is watching. We have to just have a moment for ourselves. So we just take a moment and just like big love. These are like family, and so I'm honored to be here. I guess I'll start off. I have such deep kinship with Eve, and really, Eve is the reason I'm here. I'm glad to be here with the rest of you, but it really is because Eve called. And that is actually how Eve and I's relationship began, because Eve came, as she shared, to the Radical Dharma camp in New York a couple of years ago. I think it was 2018, and said, I'm gonna ask you to come and do something. And I said, okay. There's a way that people say that. I'm like, okay, sure. And sure enough, before I knew it, I was there in Pittsburgh, with this just really beautiful community and a beautiful building. And now we all find ourselves here, a couple of years later, in very unexpected configuration, and yet and still the labor is what I like to say. We say the work a lot, and I always tell people, Black folks have worked enough. So uh, we have worked. We labor, we toil, we bring. There's something that we move through our bodies, that is, doesn't have a kind of beginning and an end. And there's a way in which we have to prepare ourselves for that reality, kind of navigate confronting the reality. It's different. I go to work and I get off work, but the labor of reclaiming justice, finding justice, building justice, fabricating justice out of a place that is unjust, out of a condition that has been unjust since its inception, is a different kind of effort. And I think it's really important for us to understand that. And it is the work of embodiment that has allowed me to really come to that awareness. And I think much of the language and much of how I approach and relate to the notions of racialization and liberation and transformation have to do with finally allowing, at whatever point, the understandings to be something that emerges from my body, not doesn't get grabbed from, like, a book or a training or a workshop or anything, right? That the really deep understanding is something that is really embedded in our bodies. And we have a knowing, and I can't think of really two other people. I mean, maybe there's one more, but two other people that have, over the course of my time, we have so often danced together in deep conversation around what it means to be embodied, about how we understand embodiment in a culture that is designed to have us disembodied, right? And how it is that we reclaim that, how it is that we allow ourselves to remember in a nation state whose greatest show is to forget. I've been in the deepest conversations with these two people, and so I didn't know when I came that it was going to be with Dr. Sai originally. I didn't know it was Dr. Sai and Akila, and so I think we are. I feel graced, and I hope that you all feel graced by this conversation as well. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-author of Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation, Dr. Yasmin Saidullah, to say a little something, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Rev. It is an honor to be here, and so good to be here with Brother Akila as well. We've been in conversation through the summer of uprising, and I'm so glad to be back in community today and with all of you. This is such an auspicious time, and as Reverend Angel said, this is a period of time that it would be really easy to get caught up in the wave of seduction of trying to solve the problem that we face with our heads, right? We have a new administration, we have so much more energy, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel potentially in the pandemic. And so we're already starting to anticipate how to solve for the problems that have arisen over the past year into mainstream visibility, though many of us have been sitting with these struggles, with these challenges of police brutality, of healthcare inequality, of gentrification and displacement. the rise of white supremacy for a long time, right? But this is the time not, I would suggest, to go to our academic resources. And I say this as an academic and have been snatched back from the jaws of kind of falling off the cliff of head spins in trying to figure out solutions to complex problems using intellect alone. And it ends up leading to such despair. It ends up leading to such unraveling. And part of what we are really centering today is, how do you center a way forward that comes not just from intellect, not just from research and history. Those things are very important and cannot be overemphasized, honestly. But we can't leave our bodies behind. We can't leave our congregations behind, our family, our kin, the people who help us get here, both ancestors and present company. And this is work that really begins and ends with choice. There are a million other things to pay attention to. And the combination of commitment in your heart and in your spirit and in your body, with your intellect and your politics and your activism, is precisely what we need to slow down in this moment of really we're winning, and see more clearly what is needed in this moment. Yes, we want to celebrate the wins, but we also want to notice on the landscape, along the horizon, what can we see coming now that we know where we've been? And so that's the work that I think these two are just fabulous at. And I love bringing my little academic nerdy self to these conversations because it's just such a heart-opening breath of fresh air to be able to feel through these challenges with such leaders, rather than constantly be hand-wringing around the right thing to do. So that'll be my introduction for today, and I'll pass it off to Akila.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Sai. It's always such an honor to be able to share the space with, with my sister, my kindred, like kind of spirit, like, Reverend Angel. We have been on the front line and in the trenches. Like Rev was just in Newark, during some of the worst times during the pandemic, facilitating a healing retreat online, in which I think we had like something like 50 or 60 people sustained for 6 straight hours, just to give you the, the depth, of knowledge and wisdom that that both Reverend Angel and Dr. Sai bring, to this respected work. I'm always just humbled, to have an opportunity to kind of share my story, and to talk about this connection between, like, a racial justice movement. And I love the title of this year's summit, that is Rise, Revolt, and Repeat, right? Because that comes directly out of, I feel like, the work that I've done for the past 30 years. Growing up in the Jordan housing projects in Watts, and participating in what many social justice activists call the longest running war in the history of this country, just been urban street gang wars. In LA County alone, we've lost, in the past 30 years, I would say between 1983 and 2003, over 30,000 folks who have lost their lives. Doesn't include those who have been permanently maimed or incarcerated for the rest of their life behind their participation. Our cries have fallen on deaf ears, because we live in a system that's built on systemic racism and implicit bias. And so therefore, instead of seeing this as a public health epidemic, the victims were blamed, for the violence that has been perpetrated against them, right? I was instrumental in organizing the peace treaty that changed the quality of life in our community. And we took that movement to multiple cities across the country, decreasing violence across the nation. But because, again, we were young Black and brown men and women who engaged I would say, a community-driven strategy around reducing violence and crime, we weren't credited with our work. And even today, when you look at the history of Los Angeles, they'll talk about everything. They'll talk about all types of things that have come into the community that have decreased violence and crime. They talk about, this investment in law enforcement that has decreased violence and crime. And we know statistically these things are absolutely not true. The public execution of George Floyd this summer was an inflection point, another inflection point in the history of this country in terms of public safety. Law enforcement will never again be a single point of contact for safety in our respective community. And when we talk about reimagining, public safety and police reform, we're not just talking about procedural justice trainings for law enforcement and investing in more de-escalation strategies for the police. It's now time that we invest in community-based infrastructure, complementary strategies that actually reduce violence and crime significantly without collateral damage and unintended consequences. We've invested last year alone, $285 billion in policing. $285 billion in policing alone. We haven't invested a fraction of that money in community-based public safety movements that have evidence-based results, practitioner-based results, that shows that when you invest in people, people are infrastructure in community. When you invest in people, you invest in their training, in conflict resolution and mediation and de-escalation strategies, in understanding trauma. You create sustainable efforts on the ground that can be maintained, like the work we've done in Newark, and I'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that during our conversation. But Newark was on the top 10 most violent city list for 50 consecutive years, almost. And in 2015, we had double-digit reductions in homicides with the development of our community-based public safety initiative, partnering with law enforcement, coordinating our strategy under our fearless leader, Mayor Rash J. Baraka. And we followed that up every year since then. In 2020, Newark had 51 murders. In 2019, we had 51 murders. And 51 murders, let me tell you, is too many, right? But to have, that 51 murders represented a 60-year low in terms of declines in homicide in our neighborhoods. In the South Ward, where violence has been concentrated for years, we had a negative 48% reductions in homicide. And this is community engaging a strategy in reducing violence in our neighborhood. And then in June of this year, last year, we worked with the mayor to move 5% of the police department's budget into a new Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. 60 to 70% of those dollars will be allocated to community in the form of, RFPs to help build community-based public safety infrastructure, right? Because the reality is this: you can't have public safety without the public, right? And so when we talk about safety in this country, Black folks ain't never felt safe here. Black folks ain't never felt safe in the U.S., right? But we understand that we're at a crucial point, right, in history. And now we have the tools, we have the relationship, the skills, we have the divine feminine in the White House, straight up, where we're gonna restore some balance for the first time in the history of this country. This has been yang, for 350 years. We have the presence of the divine feminine. Metaphorically, symbolically, however you want to see it, I'm saying literally, that this world has changed. And now it's up to us to carry it forward. It's not the responsibility of the administration to make change. It's our responsibility. And so that's why we're here, to engage this conversation and to talk about how we rise, how we revolt, and how we repeat. Because this is essentially what my life has been for 30 years. Organizing the peace treaty in the neighborhood, the rise. The revolt was saying that, hey, law enforcement is not responding to us justly. The criminal justice system doesn't see us as human. So we revolted. And now we're repeating that strategy. And as a result of it, in multiple cities all across the country, this community-based public safety work is having a huge impact. And now it's about moving billions of dollars, trillions of our tax dollars, because government ain't got no money. That's our money. And we need to engage the system so that we can actually learn how to move it into our respective pockets so that we put public safety safely and respectfully back in public hands. And that's my introduction. And I'm looking forward to engaging this dialogue, and let's go.
Yeah, so I think that we, I know that there was some challenge, so I want to just make sure my sound is okay for the audience. Are folks able to hear me okay? Am I a little louder? Yes, good, thank you. Okay, so, I think that one of the things that perhaps is really important is to really root this conversation in, at least for me, my own acknowledgement of like my biases or my understanding or my perceptions of where we are, right? And so I would say for me, I believe, and this is with no blame to, it's sort of like where we are is where we are, right? And where we have been has been a conversation around our racialization that is defined by our oppressors, and the method of unpacking, of discovering, unpacking, unfurling, and renegotiating the fact of our racialization. The method has been the method handed to us by the same systems that have bound us within systems of oppression and incarceration and racialization. And for quite some time, I first of all, didn't recognize that, right? It's sort of like you're in the waters that you swim in. And, I learned as a Black person growing up in America that I have a distinct frame of reference that is handed to me, as I can be as Black as I want to be, but I'm in America. And I am the shape and the contours of even my family relationships are shaped by, American values, sensibilities, priorities, motivations, and so on. So first I didn't recognize it. And then when I did recognize it, and many of us have, because we stop and we say, oh, we're colonized, we have to decolonize. And I add language to that idea. And then rightfully, I think, have some righteous anger around the recognition of that, the ways in which we're trapped inside of trying to unknow something that has been imposed upon us with the very same tools, methodology, systems that have been part of the obstruction and the theft of our freedom, and our freedom, not just our physical freedom, because this is what's important, right? It's like, it's not just been our physical freedom, it's been a freedom of, our heart minds, it's been the freedom of our bodies. And that's not to say that it's total, because if it were total, we would never have aspired for liberation, right? So there is something that exists in us, for us, that compels us towards liberation, in spite of all of the information that says, that's the end of the road. That's as far as you get. That road ends there. That fence right there, that barbed wire fence, that pack of people that are there going to hang you or threatening you, like that's as far as you can get. And yet, in spite of it all, right, we have through our ancestors have insisted on something greater than anything that was apparent at all as being possible. And this is what I think about the notion of being embodied, because there has to be something that is, we tend to say subconscious, but I want to say embodiment, right? It's something beneath even our bodily physical experience that compels us into something, greater than anything that's around us. I use that same thing to back up into this awareness that I needed to stop being mad at white folks and white-bodied people around the ways that they perpetuate the system, because if I couldn't think my way out of something different, right? If I had to tap into something different in order to be able to reconceive the possibility of my liberation, and I'm coming with the operating instructions that demands my liberation, how could any white person even begin to conceive of my liberation? They cannot. And I can't be bothered being mad at them, because it's beyond their conception. My liberation is beyond, I don't just mean imagination. I mean conception. I mean, don't have the synapses, right? The mental building blocks to conceive of it. It just not available. And that's humbling and, hurtful. And it puts us on the hook, right? It puts Black people on the hook for their own liberation. It puts brown people on the hook for their own liberation. It puts queer people on the hook for their own liberation. It puts us on the hook for our own liberation, to not recede in terms of pushing the system, but to not expect our need to push the system to provide certain things or to yield certain things, to not conflate that with them having any, not just will, capacity to provide for our liberation, And as long as we're doing that, what we're doing is reducing the notion of liberation to materiality. Because that's the only thing, right, that the systems can provide, or like access to material resources. And if we reduce our liberation to the notion of material access, right, that somehow my liberation is bound in material gain, anything material. I even mean healthcare. I'm not saying that I don't want to be well. I want to be well, but if healthcare as we know it, as we understand it, see, the frame of healthcare is about material things, right? It's about hospitals, and it's about medicines, and it's about, and I'm not saying those are not important, but they're not my liberation, right? They're not my liberation. I'm not saying that access to food and water are not essential, but they're not my liberation. Those are two different things. And so then I get clear about what I'm pushing for. Then I get clear about what it is I'm pushing for, what it is that I have, and therefore where to expend my energy and where to not expend my energy. I am not going to expend my energy on the expectation that you that did not have the imagination to conceive of a free Black people from your first witness could ever have the ability to conceive or imagine of the liberation of Black people. Now, what about white-bodied people? You have work to do too. You have labor to do there too, which is to go and get your imagination. Go get your imagination. Because that inability to conceive is robbing you of your life force. It's like not being able to see certain colors, and it's like you can't see green. You can't see green. And so there it is, and everybody's talking about life. Everybody's talking about like life and the way it bursts through, and you can't see green. Can't see green. And so green is an arbitrary word assigned to something that is palpable. And then we recognize it, whether it's in chlorophyll or a leaf or grass or whatever, we recognize that palpable energy and force that we call green. And I'm not saying people can't see green, I'm saying people can't see the force. You're robbed of the force. You're robbed of the force of life itself. You're robbed of the force of your own capacity for liberation. And we, in this era with a new era, cannot expect that anybody in any administration that was born out of the conception of this madhouse of the United States of America is ever truly going to do something for our liberation. Material access resources, that's good, right? Education, access to education, but simultaneously we must reframe, what does healthcare mean to me? What does wellness mean to me? So I can have the right arguments at the right time, right? So I can have the right battles at the right time and conserve my energy to place the greatest effort where it needs to be placed.
Exactly the conversation that has been really keeping me up at night. And it's precisely because we can feel ourselves collectively transforming, because we can feel ourselves changing, being changed by each other. And this is why it's precisely the time to think about and to feel into what does liberation mean to me right now? What is the horizon that we are reaching for? In the presidential inauguration speech and poetry that were so powerful and so moving, I heard echoes and resonances of language and words that have been part of abolition movements, Black Lives Matter movements, the radical revolutionary imaginations of Black liberation that aren't just about now, but are about previous generations coming to manifest in the present. That one line from Amanda Gorman, American pride is not what we inherit, but what the past that we step into, and how we repair it. This is the work right now, and that reparation work, and I see the links between repair, healing, and reparation, right? That visceral, internal kind of transformation that clears space for something new to enter the frame, that isn't not about material gains, but is also about a new vision. And at this point, what we are needing to push up against, and I love Reverend Angel's framing, it was so reminiscent of Brother David Walker's appeal to the colored people of the world in 1831, 30 some years before the American Civil War transformed the relationship to race and property that we have today. We need to continue to transform that relationship, and part of that transformation lies in language. So when we hear the president use words like the way of unity, right? Saying we need to abolish white supremacy in the United States. We need to know what that means. We can't wait for other people to tell us what that means. We can't wait for the administration to define it in policy. We are leading the thinking. The movement is making the knowledge that is going to become the inheritance of future generations. And if we are not clear with each other and ourselves about what we want, what we get will be what we've already had. And we know this to be true. We've seen it happen before. And now that we are standing, as the progeny of generations upon generations of radical imaginations of liberation, we have the benefit of hindsight. we have the benefit of looking back and seeing where we get tripped up in this work. We know that we get tripped up around gender, around sexuality, around class, around material access, inequalities, and asymmetries that keep us fighting each other rather than coming together. This is a moment of needing to rethink what unity means. When unity is being wielded by the leader of the quote unquote free world, the economic hegemon of a troubled globe. In the same instance, when he exacts zero tolerance for violence, it is still a call to arms. And this kind of unity is not the kind of unity that's going to get us past the kinds of separation that Akilah is talking about in the community. One of the challenges of this imagination, of this conceptualization, is that we're so in love with our binary oppositions, like black and white, police, not police, right? I am very, very clear that the harm and violence that falls on Black and brown bodies does not end with the police. And so if we frame all of our arguments based on that opposition, what do we miss? Who do we not hold accountable? And if we don't have the police to hold accountable, do we have protocols to rely on to heal, to repair, to seek reparation, to seek redress? This is the limit of imagination we stand in right now. And even the most, progressive folks that we have at the table are still struggling. We're still struggling. I am still struggling to understand what community accountability for harm could look like 10 years down the line, right? For my stepdaughter's children or stepchildren or, folks that she looks after. And what do I want to see for her? We have such scathing, informed, and articulate critiques about what's wrong. And we have for a long time. And I love that they're getting more and more refined and nuanced and just brilliant in their inclusion and centering of those that we have not centered before: trans people of color, undocumented folks, combinations of Native struggles and Black struggles and immigrant struggles. This is the moment of synergy. And interconnection. Realize the dream of the Combahee River Collective 1977 is coming to life. And we must not get tripped up on rhetoric. I did it in my own voice because it is so easy to do. So the fact that we're winning is actually an indication that we need to work harder. One of the challenges, I think, of resistance strategies is that often what we do is mimic the protocols, the militancy, the combativeness, the hierarchies. We saw that in the Black Power movement, right? We even saw that in Occupy. A lot of what was happening in Black Lives Matter was a upending of that hierarchical order and a decentering of those who have had historically the microphone. What that does is bring new stories, new experiences, new embodiments of what the consequences of what people in the field of prison studies are the carceral logics of mass incarceration, police brutality, reliance on the police and policing to keep us safe. And we see those effects in ways that infect not just our relationships to family and taking our loved ones away, but we also see how it affects our bodies and our spirits and the ways that we treat each other in our movements. So those carceral logics don't just end with the police. They don't just end with prisons. We find them in our movements ourselves. And one of the strangest phenomena is when we see movement actors and inspirational figures using the same carceral logics of surveillance and policing, disposability, and canceling. That's really what the whole prison system is canceling. We're canceling 2 million people right now, right? 7 million people are tied up in the system right now. When we use those same technologies to advance our movements, we bring a bit of that toxicity with us. And so
I would argue we bring more than a bit, you know. I mean, I think that that's what we're trying to lift up here, is that it's not just a bit. We do the work of the oppressor for the oppressor, right? We do the work.
And so just so what we do is we reproduce the protocols. What we really need to focus on is methods. How do we sustain this work, right? Because you better believe they will absorb every piece of poetry, every piece of rallying protest. They'll turn it into commercials. They'll turn it into their own rhetoric. They'll turn it into the right? So many people on the right using MLK's words. We know that they will take us and turn it into their own self-reproduction. Our life force will be turned into their own self-reproduction. So what is the strategy when you know you are already conscripted into a game you are trying to fight? You cannot burn yourselves out. You have to be connected to your body. You have to be connected to spirit. You have to see the limits of your own capacity to just be unrelenting, so that you can be unrelenting en masse, so that we can flock. Because if we don't learn how to do that, which means we have to learn how to hold each other accountable when we create harm in each other's communities in ways that don't rely on. These are the challenges. This is the working edge of the movement right now. And I'm so inspired to hear the work that Akilah is doing, and would love to hear ways that, how can we get involved in the academy? How can we get involved in grassroots movements to realize these projects in other places, like here in the Mid-Hudson Valley where I am. I know that there are places in urban spaces that have a lot of support to be reimagining and rethinking these institutions of accountability and surveillance in spaces that are not quite so mobilized, right? Where the challenges are that a lot of our family members and neighbors are police officers. How do we put down the binary rhetoric and approach the problem as a community?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, such profound words. I was over here writing notes and everything, like, because I was just being like triggered by you know what was being said, and it just brought me back to watching that video for the first time, you know, in the summer, of George Floyd being kneeled on, and him crying out for his mother. I mean, I just bawled the first time that I watched that film, because I mean that video, because it was reminiscent for me of the Christ on the cross, being publicly executed, innocent man, crying out for God, saying, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" To me, you know, mother is synonymous with God. So when he called out for his mother, he called out to God. And we know that in the mystery of Golgotha, right, when Jesus took his last breath, the Christ left his body, and there was a fissure, there was an earthquake, right? And so when George Floyd's etheric energy left his body, it was an earthquake. 25 million people took to the streets all around the world to protest this injustice. And to me, when we can harness the etheric energy of human beings, and we can do profound things. And etheric is defined as the electromagnetic current, that permeates the blood and pulls it through the body. We take this for granted, right? That it just happens. But the ancients called this etheric energy, this metallic, element that lives in the blood, they called it the soul, because it has no beginning and no ending, right? You can tap the blood and you can trace the heredity of someone back thousands and thousands of years, right? And so that energy is palpable, and we can harness it, and we can do something profound with it. And I think that we're holding, that Christ consciousness, that Christ energy, that etheric energy now in our hands, right, to do something profound with it. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a book in the early 1900s, The Soul of Black Folks. And he talked about our collective suffering is our birthright, right? That in this experience, that where the wounds are in the personal life is where the gift lies. And sometimes we have to sit long and hard in the anguish and the pain for the gift to actually manifest itself. But he said of Black people, because of this experience, and I would throw white folks in there as well, right? And say that Black folks have this savant-like nature. We have a conceptual view of the world that we not only see through we inherited through the colonizers, and we were forced to see the world through this conceptual lens that we were evil and that we were bad and that anything was dark. They said we were slaves, but we were enslaved, right? Language, as we talked about, is important, right? So we not only have the conceptual view of their world, but we have our own conceptual view, our own intuition, our own creative genius, right? In which we can view the world through. We've been taught and conditioned to not trust our intuition, right? And to me, the intuition is the God voice. The more we deny it, the more we decrease the amplification of the intuitive voice, so that when we ask, what should I do and where should I go and how should I do, the volume is so low that we can't hear it, but the more we listen to it, it expands, the volume, so that we can get clear direction, on how to move in the world. And that's been at least my process for me, that I trust my intuition emphatically and I follow it, and spirit, she has a vicious backhand when you don't, you know what I'm saying? To get you back on track. When you think that you know something, and then you really discover that, the more you know, the more you don't know anything, right? There's narratives that have been created, Black on Black crime, these false narratives. Black people are paying billions of dollars into public safety infrastructure, but all of a sudden we're now responsible for our own safety. You know what I'm saying? It's like these types of frames that we have bought into, that we have ingested, needs to be regurgitated and dissected. And we need to take, like a different approach, right? As you heard me say, public safety in public hands, right? We take for granted. I mean, people, when we think of public safety, you say public safety, people say police, because we've given our power away, just like how we give our power away to doctors. A doctor can tell you, because they have these letters behind your name, that you have AIDS, that you have cancer, and you will immediately start to die, because they've been endowed with this power over us, as opposed to us being empowered to have, sovereignty over our own bodies, right? Because to me, that's what Black Lives Matter was about. It wasn't a statement, it wasn't saying Black Lives Matter, as a question, it was a declaration, over the divinity of and the sovereignty of our own body, that we were saying that emphatically, that we matter. And we're not asking permission. It's not a paternalistic request. We're not seeking to be approved of, and to me, like seeing that January 6th thing, I'm like, white supremacy is in its death throes, and I'm like, okay, we're never returning back to that thing where we're asking for permission, I'm like, so now here's an opportunity for us to be able to share power, right? To be able to share power. And to me, like the work that I've been doing for the past 30 years have been essentially about that. Not an alternative to public safety, but a complementary strategy to public safety, because we can't afford, I mean, we need our officers. These are our uncles, our aunts, our mothers, our brothers and sisters, you know, especially like in a city like Newark. You know, our chief of police grew up, he's a son of Newark, born and raised, right? And so I recognize that we have a system that we have allowed, you know, our public safety infrastructure to get away from us. You know, we've dehumanized cops because of the things that they have perpetrated against community. But when we start taking a deeper look, we discover that there's a culture that exists within policing, that if a cop says, hey, I'm having an emotional, psychological distress, they get rubber gunned and desk immediately. It threatens their ability to provide for their family, you know, and it's like we expect them to be coaches and therapists and teachers, and we want them to be everything, you know, and it's a tremendous amount of pressure. The number one cause for police death is suicide. The people who experience the brunt of their dysfunction because they don't get the proper counseling, therapy, and healing modalities necessary to be able to function and face the public and do their jobs is their families. You know, and so not only the work that we do is not only about restoring balance in neighborhood and holding, you know, Pookie and Raheem accountable for the violence that they've perpetrated in the community, supporting them in their respective healing journey, creating alternative intentional healing spaces so people can talk about the deep secrets and shames.
I think Brother Aquila is you were frozen for a second there.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you back.
I was just about to say that my original wound was, see, my internet is a little unstable, was coming to terms with being sexually abused as a kid and admitting and sharing that for the first time with my college sweetheart. It was transformative. I never questioned the violence that I saw happening in the neighborhood because it meant to question the violence that I experienced in my own house. And I didn't have the language to even understand why it happened or the courage to confront the perpetrator. And it took me years to develop that practice, you know, as Reverend Angel talks about. I mean, you know, this is a practice. It's not no, you know, hey, you have a transformative experience and then all of a sudden everything is wonderful. No, you know, you have to engage this thing, you know, and it's been a journey of finding my voice, of forgiving myself, of having compassion and forgiving the perpetrator without condoning what he done, right? And understanding the gift in that experience, that as a result of my abuse, I mean, this thing used to be my greatest shame, but today it's my greatest gift. Because as W.B.E. Du Bois said, I have this capacity to see deeply and to feel deeply into things. It's like clairvoyance. I connect with people deeply who have had a similar experience. And I tell them my story. Because when you tell your deep secrets and shames, you give others permission to do the same. That's liberation. I am not my experiences. You know, the things that have happened to me, the things that I have perpetrated, they're not me. Those things they're informing who I'm becoming. They don't define who I am, right? And so we have to, you know, create these psycho-spiritual processes, you know, to be able to disconnect the emotional sting from the experience so that we can do the proper analysis and inquiry, you know, the initiation to understand like kind of where we are in terms of our those circumstances and learn how to change it. So I think that the work starts with us finding a way to be able to share your deep secrets and shames and be witnessed and do the work of negotiating the you know, the gift in the womb, because we have the capacity. I mean, we are dynamic, creative forces in the world, and dropping beneath the veil, helping us to tap into that creative force, helps us to be more present and helps us to be able to give the gift that we were inspired to give, in our conception, right? And so, yes, I'll stop there.
So I'll say that, Akila, you touched on the idea, and I'm not seeing the questions necessarily in the chat, so I'll just apologize. There is a question about, maybe it got answered. Yeah, about the 1977 book that was mentioned, Dr. Sai. But Akila, you mentioned the learning, following your intuition, and being able to trust yourself. And, that is, I would say, the core. I would imagine if folks have a question, maybe they're asking out loud or not asking out loud, is how do you do that? And I speak a lot about that as finding the signature of your own truth, right? Is like you were speaking of it in the same way that I speak about it. It's like a tuning in to the voice, to the signature, right, of your own truth, because we have to admit, and that's, I think, where I was starting from, that a lot of the voices in our heads are not ours. A lot of the voices in our heads are not, or have been inherited, have been imposed, we've been induced into ideas that are not our own, that are instructions, right? We've been given instructions, but they're not ours. And so to be able to distinguish that does require a deep listening. And as Akila was pointing to, and if you've got like a whole lot of stuff going on, or you deny the truth when you hear it, like both of those things are true, it's very difficult to discern that voice. So if you've got too much noise going on, then you can't discern, you can't pick out that thread. I think of it like an orchestra, and you've got 200 pieces in the orchestra, and the trombone is yours. Not the first the third trombone is yours. The third, you got to pick out the third trombone in that 16 trombones in a 200-piece orchestra. That's your signature. And in order to be able to train your ear, right? And when I say ear, I don't mean this thing, right? Like train your ear to the ear of your body to be able to pick out that signature, just hone right in on it, so that you can ride with it. And then, as Akila is saying, that so that you can ride, then you can listen to it. And then as Akila is saying, you have to develop a fortitude to be able to follow that signature, to respond to the instructions that you're given. That is your own truth. And that takes labor. You have to actually work at that, because you have a lot, we, that's not you, right? It's you, me, we have a lot of habituation toward not trusting ourselves. We have a lot of habituation toward continuing to maintain the status quo, even under the guise of progressivism or liberalism or so on and so forth, even under the guise of, freedom and transformation and all of that. And if you want to know whether you're doing that, if as you're participating with your people and you're doing your work for transformation, and it is not generative. I'm not saying it's not challenging. If it's not generative, then you are probably repeating, right? In other words, it's not giving you energy. And we have bodies, they get tired. So I'm not talking about that, right? But if they're making you weary, right? If the conversations with your folks are making you weary, the conversation with yourself is making you weary, then you are likely not, right? Like you're out of phase, you're out of phase. And so practice is essential. And I know that all of us here agree. Practice is essential. And practice is essential not because we're religious or, like of this or that faith or something. Practice is essential because you're already practicing something. That's why practice is essential. You want to know why? Not because you're Muslim or Buddhist or Christian or, anything else, because you're an activist, because you are already practicing something. And I guaranteed if what you're practicing is uninterrogated, you're practicing the instructions of the oppressor. You can't help it. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And then a last thing I'll say for right now is that, and then on an organizational basis, and this is something that, I will love Yves, for till the end of time. In Radical Dharma, we went back and we went backwards and we reverse engineered liberation. We reverse engineered after hundreds of people going through the work of Radical Dharma in different formations of circles and conversations and camps. We reverse engineered what we were seeing into a framework for liberation. We call it the Radical Dharma Framework for Liberation. But let me tell you, if the idea of Dharma was going to get in people's way and like trip people out and they would go, oh, wait a minute, that's Buddhist. And I don't care what you call it. So we're just going to call it the Framework for Liberation right now, right? That there are essential things that are part of instituting, and that when brought together, not as a whole, but brought together, there is sufficient framework to allow for liberation to unfold with a kind of checks and balances within that system. And it works for small systems like little groups of people, 3 people, and it works for bigger systems. And you have to apply yourself to be able to implement it. And my part of my going to coming to the summit in person a couple of years ago was because Yves shared with me that she applied the preparation, the planning for the summit at the time to apply the framework to the summit. So I'm going to just share it in a couple of quick words. We have to end and let y'all go home, and I want to make sure that Dr. Sai has a word. It is contemplative approach. It is really important that you hear, we were clear about not saying contemplative practice, contemplative approach. There's a lot of space in there, right? But we are also clear about saying embodied practice, right? Embodied practice, prophetic praxis.
Liberatory path.
Liberatory path.
Yes.
And collective process. And I'm going to say, we talk a lot about community and not enough about collective, and we don't understand the difference.
That's right.
And collective, going to community before you understand collective is prone to corruption. It is prone to corruption because you're putting something higher, like quote unquote, higher, a higher thing, a higher ideal, a God, a Buddha, a Christian, a Duda, something, a government, a US, an alignment with a constitution before you even understand what that thing is. So you have to be in spaces that are in service to your liberation. And that's what collective is. I yield.
Oh yeah, I would just add on that I get so excited when Reverend Angel says it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. That's one of my favorite Reverend Angel sayings. Another one is you can't change what you can't see, and we can see so much right now. And we need to know how. And the Radical Dharma, the framework for liberation, forget the Radical Dharma, the framework for liberation is a how. It's a how. And coming back to this collective process piece, one thing that I've been really sitting with recently is that your work is not my work. Akila's work is not Reverend Angel's work, right? The way that we shine in this work is individual and blessed. Like, that is a gift. This is a hangover from my own indoctrination from my preacher father, but the fact that we have these individual gifts cannot be fully realized if we don't know what we're holding, if we don't know who we are, if we don't know how those wounds are inhibiting and blocking the shine that we have to give to the world, right? So that contemplative approach is like, what are you holding? Take inventory, notice. The embodied practice is, where are you holding it? How are you moving it? How are you letting it move you? The liberatory path is, what have you inherited? How are you bringing it with you? The prophetic praxis is about being able to dive deep into that deep belly breath of your own inner life force and listen, bathe, just be with that space and learn how to be with it, because honestly, that's the hardest part, is sitting with yourself. It took me years to be able to do that. I still have a hard time, to be honest, but being able to do that as a regular practice makes it easier when things are harder, which is the reality right now. In that collective process, let your gift shine. Really know who you are and do not hold back. This is the time. We don't have more. It's now. And so I just really embrace this space and this work that I know you all are doing so hard. Just take care of yourselves, connect with each other, and please, please take care.
I just kicked back like I was watching a movie. Thank you, Reverend Angel. Thank you, Dr. Sai. Thank you, Akila. I'm coming to Jersey, Akila. Yes, yes. So we have your social media, your websites, everything on our website. So please, if you want to connect with Dr. Sai or Akila or Reverend Angel, come on over to the website. You can click on their social media. You can also come on over to Liberated Life Network and check us out there, because this is where all of this work is being done. And that's why I'm as dope as I am, because I hang out on the Liberated Life Network. But thank you all. Thank you so much for kicking off this 23rd annual Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit. And we will see you again. We're going to take a little break, y'all, and come back in about 5 minutes for our youth panel, our Youth Activist Panel. Hang out, stick around. And also check out, I'm just going to call it out one more time, Liberated Life Network. We're doing a half-day sit tomorrow. You can come after the Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit. You can do the second one, not the first one, or you can do the first one, not the second one. Figure it out. It's PST time versus EST time. You can figure that out. Okay. All right. Thank you again. I can't thank you enough. Blessings to you all.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, are we back? Can you all hear me? I hope everyone can hear me. Okay, well, hi everyone. To folks who were here before the break, I hope you have had some time to stretch your legs, get some water, got something to eat. To folks who just joined us, we welcome you into this virtual space. I'm Phoebe Din, co-chair of the Workshops and Programming Committee with Kevin Jarbo. I go by the she and they pronoun series, and I'm excited to be here tonight with you all. Thank you all again for joining us. I have the honor of introducing our Youth Activism Panel for tonight. Our panel will go on for about 60 minutes, with 15 minutes at the end after that for the audience Q&A. You can send a question using the Q&A feature in our Zoom webinar. Due to unforeseen circumstances, one of our panelists, Aja Diggs, cannot join our panel tonight. Please help me send a lot of positive energy to Aja and to those caring for her during this time. While our planning committee was brainstorming for panel ideas, it became very clear to us that we cannot investigate our own theme of rise, revolt, repeat, building sustained movements for social justice without thinking about our young generations. Young people are not passive observers of the world. They have been growing, practicing their crafts, envisioning the future of the collective, and putting in the work of not only sustaining current movements, but also transforming them. In this panel, we will learn about activism, organizing, and community building through the lenses of 4 young activists and community organizers, so that we can be in better synergy with the intersectional, intergenerational racial justice work of our younger generations. Please let me introduce to you our moderator for the Youth Activism Panel, Jelena McLaren. Jelena, would you introduce yourself to the audience and then get us acquainted with the panelists?
Yeah, absolutely, Phoebe. Thank you. So as they said, my name's Jelena. I'm a Pittsburgh activist that roots my work in abolition. I generally like to organize independently, helping out with whatever needs arise in the ways that most align with my views, with the world that I would like to live in. Right now, most frequently, I do my work with the Stop the Station Coalition. It's a group of folks that just sort of banded together to fight the Pittsburgh city government. We're trying to stop the relocation of a police station into a Black neighborhood. We're fighting to defund and win community control over the police. Because while I am an abolitionist, I believe that fighting for these reformative measures while we fight for abolition alongside that fight is key to harm reduction because it helps folks now. I also want to thank the folks here at the Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit for inviting me to moderate this youth activism panel, because while I might be a step or two outside of the youth myself at 27, this year I've spent so much time learning from the young people organizing around me and being inspired by that. And to move right into introducing the rest of this panel, I want to first introduce Chrissy Carter. She's someone who I personally this year have learned a lot from, and I'm excited to have her on this panel. Chrissy, would you mind taking a moment here to introduce yourself? Oh, just 1 second here. We're going to get this video sorted out. Maybe while we work on Chrissy's video, we can move to, just while we get that sorted out, to Priscilla Ortiz. She's zooming in from Southern California, and I'm looking forward to learning from her as well.
Thank you, Jelena. Miriam Cheltenham. I will preface by saying I'm going to introduce myself right now in Chantela, which is the language of my tribe, the Poundquitcham. So I just wanted to preface that. Miriam Cheltenham, Notung Priscilla, Non Washnai, P. Kumiai, No Kwam, Patty Duro, Antoinette Duro, and John LaChapa. Hello, everyone. My name is Priscilla Ortiz. I am Kumeyaay and Paumkwitcham from Southern California. And sorry, the grandparents that I have with me today are Patty Duro, Antoinette Duro, and John LaChapa. And I'm so excited to be here with you guys. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak and form better, streams of allyship with the work that's going on in both the East and the West Coast. I think we're going to have a really good discussion today. So I'm excited for that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. I'm excited as well. Chrissy, we've got your video working. Do you want to go ahead and give us an intro?
Yes, hi, you can hear me? Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm from Pittsburgh, born and raised here. I'm a youth organizer, or been someone who's done some youth organizing here in the city. And I have been organizing since I was in high school, which has been like a very, very long time, it feels like. But yeah, I'm an artist, studied acting at Point Park, currently still enrolled at Point Park for acting. Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Thanks, Chrissy. Appreciate you. All right, Anthony Hertado, another person zooming in from Southern California. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. Miriam, no tung Anthony Ika, non washnai, Payonkowicham, P non tonatam, no quam Josephine Cole, P Gary Hertado, P Mariana Norris. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Anthony Hertado. I'm coming to you from Southern California, and my tribes are Payonkowicham and Tonahatam. And my grandparents, as we usually do when we introduce ourselves, my grandparents are Josephine Cole, Gary Hertado, and Mariana Norris. And I'm really excited to be here today. I'm very honored to have been invited to this panel, and I look forward to it.
All right, thank you so much, all three of you. I'm excited to get started. Just to lay out how I picture this going, I'm going to pose a couple questions and I'll give each of you time to respond. I think organic conversations tend to be more interesting and exciting. So I don't want to allot like 10 minutes for you, Chrissy, then Priscilla, then Anthony. I'd like you to feel free to talk on the subject. And if you end up having a dialogue, that's great too. So I'm just going to go ahead, if it's all right with you all, and ask the first question. And you can take a second to think on it. And whoever feels moved to respond first, just go ahead and start talking. So the first question is, what are some issues and movements that you and your networks are working on right now? And how did you begin to work on those issues and movements?
I think I can start that off. Did a good job of rehearsing this one question, just because it's a lot. But some background to myself before I start with what issues I'm tackling and how I got started. I'm gonna stop saying that at some point, the word. I wanted to say it again. I am from I'm from Southern California, obviously. I am Kumeyaay and Paumkwitcham. Those are the two nations that I represent, but going a little deeper into that, the two reservations that I'm from is the Ipai Nation of Santa Isabel and the Rincon Band of Liseño Indians. And I'm sorry, I'm realizing I did not write that out for our ASL interpreter, so I kind of want to give him time. But yeah, so those are my two tribes. I grew up on the Rincon Reservation, and we have a few programs that are reservations host for us. One of them is an education center. It's state funded. And it's been around since my mom was a kid. She went there for a little bit, and then my brother went, and then I started going in around first grade, 2008, 2009. And from there, I started attending the Rincon Youth Storytelling Program, which is run by my amazing, very empowering mentor, Amy Admire. She's been running that for generations as well. So that's kind of just my background with the community, how I work. And within the program of the Rincon Youth Storytellers, we perform at different schools, colleges, and local San Diego areas, sharing our traditional songs, stories, and games. And with that, we are able to go to all the schools in our school district of Valley Center. We have 6, ranging from our primary school, which is like K through 3rd, our elementary school, which is 3rd through 5th, middle school, 6th through 8th, and our 2 high schools, 9th through 12. We began working with our youth through the community like that, and we just started hearing a lot about what happens in the schools. We started hearing what was going on in the schools when we started having our youth volunteer at our Indian days. They were getting a lot of backlash for coming to the event or helping at the event. Their teachers were scolding them, telling them that, you're not in that Native program, so you don't need to be down there. And it was just really harsh, and we didn't expect it. And we're like, what the heck, where is this coming from? And then we started having more conversations with our students about like, why do teachers feel that they could talk like that or feel like they could say that to you when that's a program that was brought to the school for all Native students to participate in, not even just all Native students, all students in general to participate. And we started having more conversations with our youth about what was going on in the school. And we came to find out that there's a lot of violence and microaggression towards our Native students. They see our students as violent and like gang associated because they're so proud to be from their tribe. You'll see us walking around with Liseño on our shirts, or Kumeyaay, or Payonquitchum, and our parents, they walk around tattooed Kumeyaay and Liseño because that's our identity. And I think a lot of teachers kind of saw that as like that gang mentality, not knowing that it's intergenerational pride. And so we started learning about that, and we didn't really like that. So our education center, we started going to our Title VII meetings, which is literally labeled a committee for Indian parents and guardians of children residing on Indian lands. That term has been used for us in our department for the past 20 years. And the wording hasn't been changed, and neither have the policies regarding our Indian students. So we started, meeting about that and asking them, why do our teachers feel that they could talk to our students like that? Or why are teachers scolding our students when they're out for ceremony, telling them that they didn't need to miss all that school? And it was very overwhelming for a bit. For a few years, we didn't really know what to do, and we just kept going to meetings like, why are you guys doing this? Why? And they just kept brushing it off and almost gaslighting us, telling it's not happening. Your students are just bad kids, And we know that they're not, because we run programs with them. We see them on a weekly basis, and we conversate with them. And we know that, they're not ill-intentioned when they go to school, that the microaggression that they get from the teachers is what causes them to act out, and what causes them to kind of just say, I'll give you a show then, So that's kind of what we started doing. And we created an education equity team with our school district, and through Title VI, we had that right to do it, because when schools sign to be a Title VI school, which means they receive funding from the state for every Native American child that they get supplemental funding for us. So we decided, if you guys are going to get this funding. We want an equity team to make sure that you guys are allocating this money for our Native children, to help them and to better their experience. Because our ancestors long ago, they signed for that. The colonizers, they think they got the upper hand on us by getting our land and moving us different places, but our ancestors were smarter than that, because in every treaty and every agreement that we have with the US government, it all states that we will give up all this, no fight, as long as you provide for our children, as long as you give quality education, housing, and protection of our Native children. So that, with that wording, the US government put themselves in a position to serve and protect Native children for time immemorial, the way that we served and protected our children for time immemorial before they got here, and gave us disease and gave us all these negative attributes. And, we know that we had our own problems before colonization. We did. We had our own wars and we had our own coups, but we also had ways of healing. And that's something that the school system doesn't offer, is a way of healing for our students. And that's kind of like what we're working towards. And it's kind of hard, like that question, how did you begin working on these issues and movements? I don't think I ever began because I was always part of the issue. I was always, in that seat of what can I do to make sure that younger kids don't go through this? What can I do to make sure that my cousins aren't getting suspended because they had to miss a few days of school for a funeral? That's the type of stuff that we're seeing at our school district. And it's mind blowing to even think that a whole school board is letting that happen. And I don't want to take up any more time. I feel like I've been talking forever, so I'm going to pass it to anyone else. But that's a little background of what I do, is just education equity, and it's not really measured in what I do or how many programs we start, because they're always getting started and being taken over by new people and getting passed on and reformed, and then funding gets cut out of nowhere, so then that program has to go away and got to make a new one. So yeah, that's a little background on me.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. Yeah, I really liked what you touched on in the end about how, it's hard to say when you got started because you live it. And I think that that's something that a lot of people can identify with. If you're fighting the fight, it's probably because it's affecting you personally, and that's how you got started. Anthony or Chrissy, would either of you like to go ahead and answer that question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So I work kind of really closely with Priscilla. We work a lot in the same organization, so we're familiar with the work that we do together. And yeah, kind of what she said, and kind of what you just said too, is that I've kind of grown into it. Like, these issues that have been in my own community personally have, you witness them firsthand. And so through that I was kind of compelled to go into a position where I could fight for change. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And I mostly didn't really get into sort of the activism because I've kind of never visioned myself as an activist. I've always just seen myself as a person who wants to help change the community for the better. And that's kind of pretty much what an activist does. And but yeah, it wasn't until kind of after I graduated when I graduated high school, when I really kind of became more aware, because as a younger kid, I was always blindsided just because of the place that I grew up in. It's a very highly conservative area, so these kinds of issues were always kind of never taken seriously, right? And there was never anybody around who did anything about it. And so now just recently we've started to get more, build bridges with people outside of our community, like in the greater San Diego area where a lot of activism takes place. And we've gained pointers and, resources from them in order to help create our own movements. And that's kind of that's what I was helping out with throughout the years. And just me personally, I attend University of California, San Diego, and there's an organization there called Native American Student Alliance, and I've been a part of that group since I came to college. And we partake in some activity or movements as they're in there as well, and that ranges from things just acknowledging whose land we're on to making that sort of like an official thing that they do whenever people meet, to things like gaining more Native student attendance, because the attendance rate is extremely low, probably the smallest population on campus. We don't even make 1% up of the population there. And so that's another thing that we work on at the school while I'm there. And yeah, but just going back to my community, we're very adamant about helping the youth with, like Priscilla mentioned, better educational opportunities and quality for the youth. And that goes in hand with decreasing the absenteeism rates and things like that. So that goes in, speaking from an academic level, that's what we've been doing. But also culturally, trying to revitalize our language and our culture, because that for many generations has been taken away from us. So we work really hard to kind of not only educate ourselves about our own culture, but also work in ways to help pass it on to the next generation, because that is something that a lot of Native people we believe is very important. And because once that stuff is gone, once your language dies out, we believe that, your culture is gone. So that's something that we work really hard, is to retain our language and our ways of being, our traditional ways of being, because they're part of who we are. And that's overall some of the things that I am doing currently. And yeah.
Thanks so much, Anthony. I like that I appreciate that you drew up the difference and how there are two arms to this. There's the systemic fight and there's this cultural fight, and they interweave with each other. The system is what's sort of hurting our cultures. But it's really important to note that you can fight the system and you still have to do all of this work internally in the community to keep that culture alive. Chrissy, you want to go ahead and talk about you?
Hello. Yeah, I feel like you just said it. I think it's keeping that culture alive within our own community and within our own spaces. For me, it feels challenging to go on for 3 months of organizing and all this hype, and then we just it's cold. So it's change of the season, people are not as fired up to go outside, or not as fired up to really organize. And then you have an election and you get your winner or you get your whatever, and so then we throw away our pussy hats and we throw away all of the past 4 years of all the organizing. And so it feels like a struggle to actually get people involved and to get people hey, no, we still have a lot of work to do. And getting fixated on these national conversations that are happening is really, really good. But locally, there's so much that we have to work on, specifically around when we're talking about defunding the police. Yes, we're defunding the whole, the state of the military. We're defunding the state, but we also have to we have to defund what's in our city. Currently, we have to take away that budget and look at that. So what I find working on as of right now is to get people collectively in spaces where we can learn, to foster kind of spaces where people are able to have like these intergenerational conversations and these intersectional conversations so that we can organize and get people mobilized and thinking about how they themselves can mobilize within their own spaces. And so that we're not seeing the same people showing up to these actions. We're not seeing the same people organizing or leading spaces. But we're getting like community and we're teaching. And I think it's like that thing about teaching and like passing from generation to generation of the work that is already happening and that has been happening in our city, and like uplifting those people and like investing in those folks who have already been here doing that work. And so that looks like study groups, that looks like what is an abolitionist? Like we're going around and we're screaming like an abolitionist, but what does it mean to be abolitionist in theory? What does it actually mean to have political theory in spaces, and like dissecting what that means, to dissecting all that language and like creating, like trying to make less barriers for us in organizing spaces. But that takes a lot of time to teach and like to want to actually teach people and to actually want to like invest in your community. And so, yeah, I think that's what I'm finding the most work doing right now is investing into like community and like holding a lot of those spaces for one-on-ones and like holding space to teach. It's like really draining. And this is like the teaching part is that hard work, that's the leg work. Like, yeah, going in front of a crowd and like, you know, organizing 1,000 people and like mobilizing people to go down to district attorney's office. Yeah, that's one way of organizing. But the leg work of that organizing is like when people are not showing up. That's like the behind the scenes of like getting people, hey, like I have this book. I think we should all read this book collectively and like pick out chapters and talk about it. That's like that's the real work that we have to do. And so like, yeah, sticking to like getting people into study groups. Another big thing is, of course, with COVID and with us being in a pandemic and having to always stay mindful of like systems that are already here and prior to COVID. So mutual aid is like a really big thing. Like we're still working on mutual aid. People still don't have money. People still don't have food. People still don't have jobs. There are like kids still don't have laptops and things for schools. So connecting people to resources and making sure that people are getting direct resources that they need and uplifting the community that we have to care about, because like it's not just about living, it's not just about like surviving, but it's like we have to live through this, we have to survive through this, and like we can't just die. Like we can like all of us can't just die right here. Like this can't just be the moment where everyone just chooses to like be on the front lines. Like that is the truth of it. Like we have to live through this. We have to see this. We have to see what we're fighting for too.
All right, thanks, Chrissy. I really can totally empathize with this sort of feeling that the wind, as it got cold, just like went straight out the sails, and the importance in that time of like building community and building networks. And that's the work that I've been doing, but networks and mutual aid, and it's exciting to know that that's, where your head's at too. So I'm going to move right on to the next question. Again, whoever wants to answer first, please feel free. So what would you say are some challenges that are unique to young people in activism and organizing right now? Like, what are challenges unique to you, and how have you worked through any of these challenges, if you have?
I could go. Challenges, yeah, you've seen it. So there are many challenges that we've been facing. Specifically, there's a lot of infighting, and like having youth in the middle of infighting and having young people come into spaces that have not always been made for them, but somehow these adults want us in these spaces. Like they want all these youth to get out their houses and get organized and get mobilized, right? But there's like no protection for those. There's no there's no investing into those people who you're asking to be like in the front. Like there's no, like you're leaving those people unprotected. And so now you have all these youth and young people who are traumatized from organizing, when a lot of these spaces could have been made more intentional, made with more intention. So dealing with still trauma from the summer, as someone who I'm still facing charges, like I'm still like dealing with charges that I have now on my record from the summer. And so still having to show up to court and like go in front of judges to talk about what happened 7 months ago, when quite frankly, I really can't tell you what happened 7 months ago because it was a whole different space, a whole different, where I was so different 7 months ago. So whatever I was thinking or doing in that moment, I couldn't even tell you. So still dealing with that and still trying to make sure that like community in itself is like protecting itself, because we are still dealing with all of this stuff. There are still like, yeah, a new president here. You know, we have a new wave, we have a new election happen, but like that doesn't change. That like literally doesn't change anything in daily life. It doesn't change anything in my daily life. Like now that there's still someone, like we still are dealing with these problems. We're still dealing with the school board who is not listening to students and saying like students need more resources. Like we have a superintendent who is not qualified to do its job, and we have to still allow for this man to get another like raise in his income when he's not meeting even actual needs for the students itself. Like look at the, like we're not looking at these numbers, like these numbers are not lying to us, and we are still uplifting people into these positions of power. Like we still have a mirror race that we have to get ready for. And I think people are getting all excited into the glitz and the glam of people announcing that they're going to run. Yeah, you can announce you're going to run all you want, but like what are you standing on? Who like who are you working with? What like whose hand have you already pat on the back? Like who have you already patted on the back? Like, that's what I want to know before like you're announcing that you're running, but who have you already talked to? What circles have you already been in? That's like, so that there's real work that is like still happening from the summer that we are like taking into now. And like, yeah, it's the winter and those problems are still here because nothing actually changed. Nothing actually changed.
Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, so much of that I can, just having been in the same spaces of you, resonates with me. I'd love to hear about the other side of the country, what you two have run into, or some of the obstacles that you've dealt with.
Me and Anthony are giving each other the eye, like, are you gonna go first? Yeah, I'll start. Just because what Chrissy said, very powerful. Thank you for pointing that out. And whew, you know, talking about the challenges that we go through is like, can you name all the words in the dictionary? But I kind of want to go off like what Chrissy was talking about. You know, in the last question, she said like we have to live through all this, you know, political and not even just political, but just life trauma and historical trauma. We got to live through it and we got to survive it. And even further, if we have children or if we have young people, we have to teach them about it and teach them how to heal. And even before we could teach them how to heal, we have to heal from it first. And so I think that's probably one of my challenges that I'm realizing now as a young adult. I was a teenager growing up, and I have gone through so many youth conferences that, you know, tell you what are the, you know, the right ways to heal. You know, you got to forgive yourself, you got to live through it, you have to forgive whoever, you know, did you wrong and all that. And I've lived through it, heard it. Yeah, okay, I gotta heal. But then it's like, but no, my community has to heal. My community needs this, you know, like our kids are crying right now. They're suffering. And I that's the challenge, is like healing yourself before you can go out and heal your community. But then also recognizing that you don't have to be fully healed to want to heal your community. You know, you can still be a little broken and know that other things need to get fixed. And then again, what Chrissy said is, you know, no one wants to do the background work, the grunt work of reaching out to people and getting more people to join the organization that does release that information or does put on events for activism and all that. And I think kind of just like what I felt from what you were saying, Chrissy, is that a lot of people think that the activism that we do is the answer to fix the broken system. And they kind of like to think that we got so many activists nowadays. This is a whole generation of activists. Like, we don't need to do anything. They already know what's wrong. You know, we got native TikTokers talking about boarding schools and reservation areas. We have young, you know, people of color talking about what it really meant to be like a slave on the runaway, or what it really meant to be an immigrant coming across to Mexico. Before all the border rules, you could get shot straight up. You know, your kids, your whole family could get shot in front of you if you tried stepping across the border. It wasn't you got sent to some camp and you had to fill out paperwork and wait to get released. No, you were just killed, you know? And it's like like youth are constantly having to educate other youth on what's going on, and it's not just education that's already in the school for us. And I think, you know, that too, that the proper education not being in our school systems is also turning our students away from the school system, because why do we want to be in a school that doesn't even teach us the real history? What are we really even learning there then? Like, what's the point of being there? So those are, you know, just some challenges, you know, trying to get the system to change, because they say like, oh, everyone's in the same system. You're K through 12, we got public schools, and it's like, well, white people have the system where you got hot and cold water, and then indigenous people and people of color, Black indigenous people of color, I'm sorry, you know, we have a system, but we don't got hot water. We just got cold water, and we got to make do with what we got. And sometimes that water is contaminated at that, you know, so we got to go clean it out and then start drinking it. It's never just something we can do. It's always, you got to start a program and then you have to keep it up, and you got to find funding. And I know that we're going to hold these questions till the end, but I saw one question where someone was like, so what are you saying is as soon as a program gets started and is going, it loses money for the program? And kind of to speak more on that is it's kind of like we do all this work to get a program started. Even before that, there's a lot of pre-ground work to, I'm trying to put this in a scenario to make it better understanding. So let me just put it in the school setting, because that's, you know, how I work. So let's say we wanted to begin a mental health and awareness club for our students. Well, we couldn't just go to the office and say, hey, can we get a teacher in a classroom to do mental health awareness for a club? We would have to prove that there's a mental health problem on campus first, and then present that mental health, you know, problem to the school board and then get it approved. And then maybe we'll get a club, but then we'll have to find a teacher to sponsor that club. So we'll have to find a teacher who's willing to put their free time, you know, their lunchtime or their prep period, you know, utilize that time that they don't get paid for to oversee our club. And then we have to go find funding to bring in presenters and moderators and all this stuff. And it's just, then we get the program started, we have a few events, and then it's basically considered useless if you don't have good numbers. So if you're not bringing in at least 50, 60 people, if you're not getting people to post about it or be excited or talk about it in the lunch area, then it's not a club worth keeping, you know? And I'm not saying that that's what happens in our school, but I'm just saying, like in general, that's what happens to a lot of social programs that are created just anywhere, community centers, inner city centers. It's everywhere, you know. We have so many great ideas for these programs, and we have, you know, people who are qualified to write curriculums for this, and the funding just gets stripped from us every time. The funding gets blocked, or like Chrissy said, we don't have enough people to do the background work, to do that research, and you know, stay committed to a certain program and finish that line of work out. It's almost like we're having to stagger the education of introducing someone and teaching them, you know, their historical trauma, because sometimes people don't even know that they suffer with historical trauma. They just think, oh, I have depression and I don't know why. And it's like, no, you probably have depression because, you know, you're you didn't have grandparents because they had to live on the residential school. So your mom doesn't know how to show affection because she doesn't know how to be a mom because she didn't even have a mom. You know, it's like, it's a lot. There's so many metaphors and, you know, little scenarios that happen all the time. They're just a lot. There's a lot of challenges, but I do want to end with like activists or people who want to see change. Like, they're not challenges to us, they're just another step to climb. I kind of don't like, I didn't want to say a challenge to me. I kind of wanted to say like a barrier or like another step to take, because it's not work that's pushing us away. It's just things that we have to find a way around. You gotta, you know, make the positive out of the negatives. And I'm losing words, so I'm pretty sure I think I hit everything I wanted to say. But yeah, just finding the people and getting the system to realize that, you know, it's not for everyone. It's hard, but it's needed. And if you know, we got to keep educating people, we'll keep educating people, and it's okay. But no, yeah, I understand. We want more people to do the background work and stay with us and stay committed. And it's hard, but there's the people out there, and we're finding them slowly but surely through things like this, you know? So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Bazilla. I just want to bring up something you said earlier about rest, about how it's like this balance thing where, you know, you have to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup, but you don't have to have a full cup to pour either. You know, you got to find that way, you know, to show up for your community while also making sure you're showing up for yourself. And that's like a difficult thing to learn and understand how to do when you're just like thrown into these really like high stress, intense organizing spaces. And just like having that agency, it's a lot.
Exactly.
So Anthony, do you wanna add some of the challenges you've faced?
Yeah, thank you. Y'all covered a lot of ground. Just kind of piggybacking on what was said earlier was the challenge of dismissal. And that's when, you know, sometimes youth are invited out to have their voices heard. But then after that, it's kind of like for the most part, you might get just like a pat on the back, like, oh, good for you for speaking up. But and then after that, it's kind of just stale, like, okay, now what? So that's kind of a challenge, is being taken seriously, because, you know, a lot of people might not think youth have the capability to really take on challenges. So like that's a problem, is not being taken seriously. So that's a challenge that I think a lot of activists face and that I face personally. As my voice being dismissed, and then me kind of internalizing that and believing that what I said didn't really get across to people. And so you kind of take that to heart, right? And so that can be a challenge in itself, and then overcoming it. And another thing too that is really challenging is when sometimes youth become stakeholders. You know, where I'm from, there's just not a lot of people who in my community who choose to speak up. And so you have a very wide majority of people who kind of aren't in those spaces and working with a network to create change. And so you're kind of left with just a couple few people who end up doing all of the work. And that in itself can be very tiring and overwhelming, because then maybe you're dealing with a certain issue at hand right now, but then someone comes along to try throwing something else on you, and then you're like, wait, I'm dealing with this. Sorry, speaking kind of fast. I'm dealing with this right now, and I don't have the resources or the mental capability to take on that as well. So it becomes a challenge when people kind of pass everything on to you. And so that's another challenge. And then I was kind of thinking about this as we were going along, but something that I personally face is a challenge is dealing with my own trauma that I've endured, as a youth growing up, because that becomes a very overtaking thing. It kind of takes over you when you try to overcome things that have happened, and you try to grow out of cycles within your family that sort of have destroyed your family, that have destroyed my family. And so that's a lifelong process, right? It never stops. Working to drain out all the trauma and getting rid of those cycles. And so that's a major challenge that youth face, because you're just starting out in life, and choosing to go down that path is a lot to overtake. And so that in itself poses a challenge to creating a mental state of mind, or a strong state of mind, where you can actively participate in other activism type situations. So that in itself is a very big challenge. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Again, that's a lot that resonates with me. It was a ridiculous, just thinking about this summer alone, myself and so many different youth activists just pouring that trauma out on the streets, and dealing with, at the same time, dismissal, not being taken seriously, and being given so much responsibility. It's like this ridiculous thing to try to balance. And I appreciate you highlighting it. So I'm gonna skip around on the questions a little bit, just because I like the last one a lot, and I want to make sure to get it in here. So what have you observed while working with elders in the movement, and what advice would you have for the elders or the young generations coming after you in terms of fostering intergenerational activism work in the future? It's a lot, I know.
One thing I've noticed is that the elders, my elders, the problems that we face today, they were dealing with when they were my age. These problems have really never went away. And it's just that now, or back then, they didn't necessarily have the capability and the resources to speak up, because, in that time period, it was definitely a life or death situation. So even today it is. But yeah, there was, and just that freshness of the trauma that I was speaking about, because my elders experienced boarding schools, and when they were just small children, having their culture beaten out of them, and that all of that trauma just closing in on them. And so they have a lot of internal challenges that the youth today face. And so, they may not display it, but they're definitely behind you when you become the forefront of a movement, because they resonate with you. And so, yeah, that's something that I've noticed from the elders, and they, they're always going to be there to support you no matter what, because at the end of the day, the elders know what's right from wrong. And so that's something, yeah, that I've come to take into account. And in terms of advice for upcoming or future youth and youth now, when it comes to things, don't be afraid to take up space. I know personally I was definitely always afraid to do that, but over time, as you continue to do that and continue to voice your opinion, that it speaks itself into fruition. So it manifests itself when you continue to continuously fight. So don't stop. It's always hard. It's kind of might be hard. It can be difficult to start. Yes, of course. So whatever way you can, whether it be joining movements that are within your area or speaking up on social media, starting petitions, anything like that, do it. Like, don't hold back, because the first step is with you taking a healthy risk. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I like I know it sounds simple, but like the just, do it and take the risks is something that it took me a long time to do, and was immediately like the trauma you feel watching these things happen to you and to others, having agency over that is something that's important to me and helps me cope with that trauma. And doing this work is something that's really helpful. And thanks for saying that. Just do it. It will help. It'll be hard, but it will also help to be doing the work. What about you, Priscilla or Chrissy?
I think I'd say, okay, let me read the question. Okay, yeah, so I think one elder that I want to kind of just touch on real quick is something my grandma said. I live in a multi-generational household. I live with my grandma and my great-grandma, both very strong women. But my great-grandma, Patty Duro, she was a researcher for Scripps. She did a lot of the, present groundwork of preserving our culture back in the, I don't want to get the number wrong, so I'm just going to say late 1900s. She's an elder, so you'll know kind of how far back that is. But she did a lot of that groundwork. And I do take a lot of some of what happens in these school boards and school board meetings and forums. I do take that home with me because sometimes it gets heavy. And like Anthony said, sometimes you internalize the things that were said against you or said to you. You internalize that, or you feel like you shouldn't have spoken, or things like that. Just that ugly feeling that you get when you don't feel appreciated or seen or heard at a space that you thought was giving you space to be seen and heard. But I take that back to my grandma, and she always just says, just keep going, and it's gonna be okay, and that the change that you want to see isn't gonna be change that you're gonna see tomorrow. And I think she's speaking on the educational side of the change that I'm trying to make, but I think it just goes for any type of change that we're trying to make, is that none of this change we're going to see tomorrow or in a month. We're only going to see it in the generations to come. And I kind of like that because we can only make it better for each coming generation. We can fix one problem, and if there's still problems, well, we have another generation that we can try again. And little by little, all these, little policy changes and, changing the scope of your school's mission statement to include Black, Indigenous, people of color and their proper history. I think when we slowly start making that change, we'll see it, not in our city, but it'll be a world change eventually. And I like that she says that, because it kind of grounds me, and it keeps me from wanting to be like, why am I even doing this? Because there's a reason for everything, and, it'll come. And I think that's probably what my elders have taught me best is patience. And also just elders now in general, they've really taught me not to hold angst or any type of hurtful, or I can't even say the word because I don't feel that way about them, but like I don't even know, like anger, I guess, not to hold anger against the people, because like our keynote speaker said, you know, white people, they don't always see their privilege. They don't always know that they're a step higher. They don't know that they have more resources than us. So we can't always be mad at them. You know, we have to be able to teach them. And I think that's something to like teach, not tell, because we don't want it. I mean, of course, they force so much upon us, but at the same time, it wasn't the current, you know, white people. It was past white people. So we kind of have to teach them their own history, which is something that we have to be, I don't like saying it, something we have to be okay with, I guess. And we kind of have to just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that elders teach me like a level of patience that I didn't know I needed. I kind of thought like when I went into this whole, you know, going to school meetings and stuff, I just wanted to be up on the mic. You need to change this. You need to do this. You need to give money to our programs. Like, and it's like, whoa, slow down. You know, like they need to know what we don't have first. You know, they need to know where we are at now before we can tell them what we need. So that's kind of what I've seen while I've been working with them. And I guess I would want to give some advice to, I don't want to speak over elders, but if elders are looking for ways to better serve their youth or collaborate with them, I would just say, you know, I kind of just want to say, like Anthony said, just take that healthy risk and just go do it. You know, like if you're an elder and you see a kid that's, you know, obviously not doing the right thing, or you can see that they're kind of on a bad track, just reach out to them. Because there's just something really comforting knowing an older person cares about you, an elder person who's experienced so much in life, you know, has some type of care for you. So I would probably just say make the connection, take the healthy risk and get to know an elder or get to know a young person, because we have a lot more in common than we would like to think. You know, our elders have fought, like Anthony said, in a lot of movements before our time that we're fighting right now. So I would just say, yeah, make those connections.
Thank you, Priscilla. Yeah, and I thank you for talking about like the connections and how important that is. And Chrissy, I'd love to hear what you would like to say on this.
Well, first, I want to emphasize, because I think it's important to, because as we're having dialogue, I want to push back on the idea that white folk don't know what's going on, because I think for me, it feels a little bit dangerous to let white people get away with that much, and like they are not that ignorant. Like they're not. And if white people know exactly what is going on, it's not affecting them on a personal level into which they have to actually care about it. And I think that's what we have to like really emphasize, is that you know exactly what's going on, but do you care enough to actually hold space and to talk about it? No. But is it like,
sorry, I just wanted to yes, exactly. I think that's why I started slowing down around that part, was because I was like, I kind of said something that wasn't fully true. I think what when I'm speaking right now, I'm kind of taking my mindset back into high school. So I was kind of speaking on like high school white people. And let me just say it real quick, is because we didn't have words for, you know, like I didn't know what microaggression was. And I do, like, yes, white people do know that they have a higher point and all that. So yes, praise, praise, praise. Thank you for correcting me. I just wanted to say that because I knew I'd probably dwell on it later after being like, why did I say that? So thank you so much, Chrissy. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no. It wasn't pushing back on you, it was just pushing back. I just wanted to make sure, emphasizing that none of the white people walking away from this today believe that they don't know what's going on, or anyone in their circles don't know what's going on, because they do. And I think, thank you so much for touching on language, because I think that's what I was going to talk about was language. Like that's a huge thing. I think that there's this barrier, and like we all have barriers in language because we don't have we don't have the same lived experiences. We all don't come from the same places. So language is a barrier. What some things I say come off are so differently how people may receive that because of lived experiences and different intersections that we all are within. So language is a big thing. And I think, especially with intergenerational conversations, language becomes a barrier when we say things like intergenerational, when we say things like intersectionality, when we say things like school to prison pipeline. Like, like our grandparents, our community of elders know exactly what we're talking about. It's the language that we the language that we use is a lot different than language that our grandparents share and that we share in intergenerational conversations. And so I think there's an education aspect of there's so much that young people have to learn from our elders. There's so much that our elders have to learn from us. And so creating spaces that are intergenerational is so important in our organizing, because we cannot allow ourselves to believe that there's no intersectionalities within these spaces that we're organizing within. We can't it would just be a disservice to really not lift up those intersections, because I think that's what's going to make this organizing so much more important, because we all live within different intersections. And so if we're talking about critical and radical organizing, we can't do that without talking about trans people, right? We can't talk about uplifting and dismantling these systems without emphasizing that trans people are the most affected by these systems, that they are the ones who are going to face the most violence. They're going to face the most racism. They're going to face the most disservice to healthcare, because there is no healthcare for trans people. So we can't even begin to organize or begin to have these conversations if we don't have those people in the room, because we can't speak for those people. We can't speak for us. We can't we can't say, let's talk about anti-racism work, and there's no one who is Black doing writing that work out that you need to learn. And then you're asking people to teach you for free. There's that too. And so we can't just ask people for their labor and keep asking people to teach them and what do I need to know? You have to pay those people too, because you're asking us to air out trauma. You're asking us to spend actual time to speak and to actually talk about throughout all this. And yeah, this stuff is not fun. It's not like a joy. And so you do need to pay people for their time and make sure that you are investing into these people and making sure that after having this conversation that they are getting the care that they need for airing out all their trauma. Yeah.
Thank you, Chrissy. Appreciate that. And I appreciate both the dialogue and the pushback, and just talking about how it's a intersectional, intergenerational conversation, and we just have to always be listening to everybody's perspective, because everybody has a different lived experience, and those lived experiences bring such important things to the table when we're organizing, and lifting from the bottom, lifting from the folks who are most effective is you're going to achieve the most that way. So thank you a lot for bringing that up. I want to end on a little bit of a lighter note, because these questions have been hard. I want to hear briefly what gives you hope and what re-energizes you in this work. What helps you work through this and feel good about
it? I think what gives me hope is when I truly feel like I'm not alone in these movements. When I hear testimonies and experiences from other people who do the same work that I do, that we do, it's very reassuring, because you definitely can lose yourself in self-doubt and outside opinions that aren't necessarily uplifting. So definitely connecting with people who share the same morals and the same traumas. I mean, that sounds a little weird to say that, but definitely when you relate on trauma, it can be healing because you realize that you're not alone in that, and that other people, while it's not necessarily the same, we relate, right? We know that we have struggles. And so, yeah, definitely for me personally is, yeah, I already said it, like not realizing that I'm not alone. What was the other part of the question?
Hope and energy. And I think that, that answers it. And also you can add more if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure. Pretty much, yeah, that gives me energy and hope. Yeah, so.
Thanks, Anthony. What about you, Priscilla and Chrissy?
Are you talking? Oh, okay. Black people give me hope. Like I love Black people, and they give me hope, especially Black queer people. We really want to center those people, because those are people who are the backbone of our community and the backbone of all of our organizing. And they have, like, throughout history, Black queer people have always shown up, like, for everything, and they're the most marginalized people. And so, yeah, black people, Black art, black people smiling. I want to see Black people resting. Like, I want to see Black people in this summer, like, resting. Like, if they're in Oakland, I just want to see them down by the Shinley Park resting. Like, that's what gives me hope, is to, like, Black people resting and Black people having the resources that they need. Like, I do not need Black people showing up on the front lines. I need them getting resources and making sure that they're resting and making sure that they're eating and making sure that they're taking care of themselves and their families and their communities.
Thanks, Chrissy. Me too. Priscilla.
Yeah, I'm not, well, pre-pandemic time, I guess what gave me, re-energized me was mainly going to the events, the movements events, women marches, going to, back to school programs, even just visiting, like, the few kids that are allowed at the Ed Center right now, just being able to visit them and talk to them and see them, it really does, it re-energizes me. Also just like attending, or I guess talking about currently now, with everything being online and you don't really have a place to go escape to, something that has been re-energizing me is these panels like this, and then just also conferences that are being hosted by Native-based organizations. And I'm sure our other communities have conferences like this, where you have a place to heal and talk about the trauma that you've been through. That it really does give me a lot of energy. Even just recently, I went to the Indigenous 20-something project, and it gave me so much hope and so much energy. So I would just say like being around like-minded people and people who have the same energy as me is really nice. And when I can't be around people, I would probably just take a break, step out of that activism world and take time to yourself and remember who you are and what you like and what you enjoy to do, apart from the activism that you enjoy to do. I think that's a good re-energizer too, is just remembering that you're a person outside of this movement that deserves happiness and that deserves rest and deserves to be the best version of yourself that you can be in the midst of all this trauma and chaos.
Yes, and we're people outside of whiteness too.
Exactly.
That's so important. we like are so much more. Like, I think, yeah, that is like so important too. Like someone, I remember being at this thing last year pre-COVID, and like we were like talking, and I said something, and they were like, you know, like we exist outside of whiteness, and so thank you for touching, because we exist outside of them.
And
Thanks.
even just like existing outside of whiteness and then reiterating that we're not trying to become whiteness, you know, like our efforts and stuff isn't so that we can be on the same pedestal, it's to bring us down and equal. So yes.
Yeah, that like just reminds me of something that was said during the keynote on like liberation isn't a material thing, you know, we're here for ourselves and our cultures. And that's where our goals are. You know, of course, there are so many material things that are associated that we need, but true liberation is agency and able to be ourselves and not have that expectation of whiteness or expectation of any of that piled on us. So thank you all for this part of the panel. This is great. I want to move to the Q&A. I'm going to first ask a question that came from Kelly Henderson. They asked, how can folks here today support and donate to Anthony, Priscilla, and Chrissy's current work? Or, oh, one second, it disappeared. Sorry, okay. How can folks here today support and donate to Anthony, Priscilla, and Chrissy's current work, or to them as individuals? For those in Pittsburgh, how can folks here today join, if they're welcome, to the connecting and mobilizing spaces of study groups or teachings that Chrissy mentioned or is working on right now? So yeah. What if you want to start that question, since this was a question from somebody here in Pittsburgh, and then we can go around and say orgs that you might want to donate, or personal Cash Apps or Venmos or whatever you'd like to shout out.
Yeah. So currently the work that I'm specifically working on is going to be targeted towards the youth, and trying to get youth to talk about abolitionists and talk like, what does that mean? Do they even know what that means? Do you even want these police to be gone? Do you want any of these systems to be gone? So yeah, a lot of what I am targeting my work is going to be a lot of youth organizing, but there are many different like study groups, and there's a lot of material out there of PDFs that are already like available for like abolitionist study, but like I don't have the like.
Oh, your mic cut out for some reason, Chrissy. Chrissy, your mic cut out? I hope it's not just for me. No.
Knock warrants and working on really making sure that we're holding the ACJ accountable. And so a lot of that work is moving towards an abolitionist theory, and it's working in reform, but coincide with what we are calling for and demanding in abolitionist theory.
So Chris, your mic cut out for a second. So if you could just, I know you're talking about APA, if you could just do the beginning of that part again. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes. So I was just saying, APA is working very closely on the Breonna Taylor no-knock warrant right now. And so that is like an org that has monthly meetings. They are membership based, and that you can be involved in, and like within community. There's so many different organizers who are working over there currently. There are just so many different community members working over there currently. So I would really tune into them. And then One Hood also does their Power Hour virtually, which brings on different organizers from the city to talk about what's really going on. Trans Uniting is a Black trans-led organization that is in the community doing work on the front lines and making sure that they are really investing into the Black trans community here in Pittsburgh. There's also Sisters PGH, which is has a ton of resources for anti-racism work, especially around the Allegheny County Jail, and specifically regarding Black trans women in Allegheny County.
Thanks, Chrissy. Priscilla and Anthony, do you wanna pipe in here?
What was the question again?
Oh, so how can folks here today support and donate to you, Anthony, and Priscilla? how or support your current work or to support you as individuals?
I say an important way, just currently right now in, the online world that we're kind of stuck in is just attending conferences like this, listening to the voices that are being on I can't come the word, but supporting those people that are taking the healthy risk to speak out on it, and supporting them can be as easy as just giving them a like, giving them a share, being a view, watching the ad before their YouTube video. There's so many ways, and if people are looking to donate, I would say just a few of the organizations that have helped me growing up is, one being the Rincon Indian Education Center. I would say we would accept donations. We are state run, but we do try to do a lot of other programming for our kids, like buying them the tools that they need to explore the natural plants around here. I'm trying to look around. I'll put our email and our mailing address into the chat, and then our moderators can put it into the big chat, I think, for me. I would say that my mentor is in here. I think she wants to say something.
They can support by attending our online events.
Yes, we have our online events. We have a storytelling program that we do here at the Ed Center. I don't want to go too far in, but we have our Facebook page. I did put it in with my social medias that I submitted before this. If you go to the Rincon Indian, if you look up Rincon Indian Education Center on Facebook, it's a Facebook page and the logo looks like this. If you want to find that, and just message us about further ways to donate and promote, we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. Anthony, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so we pretty much, Priscilla and I work in a lot of the same programs. So you'll find a lot of information on the things that she just told you guys about. So if you just go to Rincon Indian Education on Facebook, you will find a lot of information there and how to donate. But also, I mentioned earlier that I was part of an organization at my school. So that's called Native American Student Alliance, or NASA. And we don't have a website or anything like that, but you can follow us on Instagram at NASA_UC San Diego. And I'll put that in the chat for y'all. And but yeah, those are pretty much what I have.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll just add that the group that I organize the most with is the Stop the Station Pittsburgh Coalition. You can follow them at Stop the Station Pittsburgh on Facebook, or Stop the Station PGH on Instagram, or Stop the Station on Twitter. Ways to, we're not an organization that has to operate with any money. Mostly we're doing campaigns to pressure our local representatives. So following along and joining in on those campaigns, calling, attending the city council meetings, pressuring our mayor, whether it's Bill Peduto or it's somebody new in May, making sure that pressure doesn't stop. So it's important that we just keep on all of that. And then I just also want to shout out Take Action Mon Valley. It's just another organization that highlights a lot of the activism gets a little hyper focused on Pittsburgh generally, and Allegheny County is wide and diverse. And because of how gentrified and how segregated Pittsburgh is as a whole, it has pushed so much of the Black community outside of city limits. And so when the organizing and activism focuses just on Pittsburgh, it ignores a lot of the things that are happening to Black folks who are our community. And Take Action Mon Valley, covers and cares about things that are happening in Pittsburgh, but also make sure to include and highlight everything that's happening elsewhere outside of city limits. So Take Action Mon Valley is a great org to follow and donate to, and follow their action items when things come up. And all right, so I think that's a good answer for that question. Let's go ahead and move back to the other questions. So this is a question for Anthony and Priscilla. An anonymous attendee asks, can I ask why you include your grandparents' names when you introduce yourselves? It's a beautiful tradition, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Well, Anthony, come on, you can go ahead and start it off, because I was, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, that's kind of just something that you were taught from a very young age, but it's a way when you're at an event or a gathering where you're performing, it's a good way for you to find people who you might be related to. So, I'm just talking about my grandparents, and maybe somebody comes up to me later and saying, hey, I know your grandma, or I know your grandpa, because especially in Indian country, it's very, very small, and a lot of people know each other. So it's a way to make connections and expand your family.
Yeah, this was something that was taught to us by my mentor that came in, Amy Admire. She had us start doing that. And me and Anthony, we will say every time we've introduced ourselves, we've said our names, our tribes, and our grandparents since the first grade. After we were taught, and like you said, it's just a way of letting people know who we are, and also honoring where we came from. Because a lot of time we are raised by our grandparents. They're the ones who put the most work into raising us and providing for us. And it's just kind of a way to honor them for bringing you up. Because when I speak, these words aren't only mine, they're words from lessons I was taught from my grandparents, and lessons I was taught from my mentors and elders before me. So yeah, that's just why we share our grandparents.
Thanks, Priscilla. Actually, this next question is for you, and I think it's going to be our last question, because most of the questions left in the chat are just people appreciating us and our time. But this question came up on your first answer, and this is Molly, Sophia, and Jocelyn asking, how do people respond to other students who speak insensitively to Native American students?
How do other people speak? Let me read that for myself.
I'm sorry, I think I moved it to answered and I shouldn't have. Oh, here it is. How do people respond to other students who speak insensitively to Native American students? So if it's not coming from like the system teacher level, and it's coming from like a peer-to-peer issue.
Student, I feel that that's kind of just seen as student bannering. And okay, so there isn't much recourse about students that antagonize Native students, like when there's something being said, there's often, discipline carried out when the Native student responds. So when the Native student claps back or defends whatever they were doing, or says that it's none of their business, that's when it's like, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, they said that, like, so there's not much recourse that goes on for students who speak insensitively. I do actually kind of want to give an example that I do speak on a lot is at my high school, we host a California Indian Day every year. And one year, this girl, she was a faculty's daughter, took a Snapchat of us and posted it online. It was all of us Indian girls dancing in the quad. to our bird songs. And that's just the way we honor opening our California Indian Day. And she posted it and was just like, someone tell these savages to go back to their lands. And that was shared everywhere. Everyone was posting about it, and it was just being laughed at. And then another person, it was a male student, he posted, you know, like he posted hers and was like, if this girl doesn't get her ass beat, you know, then y'all ain't really about it. And then it was just instigating, you know, but he got in more trouble than the girl that had made that post in the first place. So far as to where actually myself and our Native American club at the time had to organize a forum so that other Native students could speak on why it was so horrendous for her to say something like that. And nothing really came out of it because her mom pulled her out of the school and enrolled her into a different school. And that was that. And that's all you heard from it. So yeah, there's not much that happens for other students who speak ill of Native American students.
Yeah, thanks for that like frustrating example, which just brings back so many memories of my own in school for, you know, getting teased and prodded and then yelled at when I finally decided to defend myself.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that just we go through. It's sadly the case for a lot of people. And it's also really frustrating when it's a adult faculty person speaking down and being like, nothing's wrong, there's nothing wrong, like, and it's like, I know it's wrong because it makes my heart hurt, it makes me feel ugly in my stomach, like yeah.
I think that's a good point that, like, you know, brings back to the first question. It's like the people, the older people, the people in charge have to just sort of honor what the youth is going through and understand that, you know, we know what we're feeling. And if you don't respect that, you're not going to like foster folks who are willing to stand up for themselves in the future. They're going to work around you instead of with you, and you're showing where your allegiances lie. So fine, that's the last question we're going to answer live. Thank everybody for this conversation. It's been great. It's been so interesting to me to hear, you know, the differences in the organizing spaces and what kind of work that you, Priscilla and Anthony, are doing. And it's been nice just to talk with you, Chrissy, and to hear things echoed from, you know, stuff that we dealt with and talked about this summer. And yeah, that's thank you. If Phoebe wants to come up and take us out of here, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Here I am, magically appearing on Zoom. But no, truly, thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Jelena. You know, I know we're 22 minutes past our promised end time, but then again, there is no end to racial justice. And if there is anything that I have learned in the past year, it is that important and good things cannot be rushed. And so to all of our panelists and our moderator who stuck around after our promised end time to have this conversation, thank you. To our attendees who are still sticking around for this conversation, thank you. And oh, what a night to lead up to Saturday's program. I honestly have no words except for that. I think we have heard so much wisdom from many generations of folks from many places, right? Talking about building a sustained movement for collective justice. And I think, the call is clear and we shall heed. And at this point, I would like to reintroduce, to call upon Kevin to come back on screen to close us out for the evening.
Thanks, Phoebe. I feel like unclicking that video button feels like walking back on stage. But to close out the night, we first ask that you visit the link in the chat box to complete a survey about your experiences tonight. That will go a long way in helping us plan future summit events. We thank you all for attending, as well as thanking our donors and community organizations that supported this year's program. So thanks to our fiscal sponsor, the YWCA of Greater Pittsburgh. We thank our presenting sponsor, Chemistry. And PRJS was also made possible with sponsorship from PNC Bank, Carnegie Mellon University, and Gateway Health. We also owe special thanks to UPMC, United Steelworkers, Builders Guild of Western PA, East Liberty Presbyterian Church, Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, Winchester Thurston School, Highmark, and the Poise Foundation. Last but not least, we thank our ASL interpreters, volunteers, and all of the planning committee members who helped bring this special event to fruition. We look forward to you joining us tomorrow for workshops, panels, affinity group discussions, and wellness sessions that start at 9 a.m. Eastern. And we also hope you all join us for the second feature panel discussion and closing ceremony at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all again. Peace and good night.